Previously on the Project Umbrella podcast.
There's a clue in it now because it's like PG's Progenitor, 67 is the year, and AW is Albert Wesker.
Oh, a great little way of remembering it there.
Tits.
I think it's tragic, Chris, though, don't you? I mean, every time one of his sort of family members or close team partners, he goes to heaven and earth to find them. You know, he did with Jill, he did with Claire and Code Veronica, and yet when he's gone fucking missing and he needs to know, oh, Claire's just jollying around going to Barry's for tea. Fucking hell.
Project Umbrella.
Hello and welcome to episode 30 of the Project Umbrella podcast, illegally supplying BOWs to the Eastern Slav Republic in order to make a cheeky offer to purchase Greece. I'm Nick, better known as Neptune. Let's have a look at who's joining our podcast today. He required a reboot to make him relevant. It's Batman.
Hello.
He's known to expose his organ on a regular basis. It stars Tyrant.
Wait, hang on a minute, how did that happen?
Are they always going to be abusive every episode?
Yeah.
An inspiration to no architects or anyone for that matter. It's George Trevor.
Hello, they obviously are going to be abusive every week, yes.
And a champagne socialist, if I ever did see one, it's Mr. Spencer.
I resent
That's true,
that
the
remark.
truth hurts.
That's awful. I am no champagne socialist.
Coming up on today's show, we have a very special edition of the Project Umbrella podcast. We're having Ada Wong special. We've never done a podcast quite like this, where we're focusing on one character spanning a whole series of games. So that's our main focus of the podcast. We also have all the latest news, and then we, of course, finish off with Neptune's Biohazard quiz. So without further ado, let's look at the news.
The news is that Resident Evil 0 HD
Oh, of course, yeah.
wasn't at Japan Expo in Paris, where they featured heavily Street Fighter. Capcom were there. They had on sale Heavenly Island,
Right.
on sale, the French edition, but William Birkin, the cosplayer who got together a load of cosplayers to go over there, very kindly reported back no Resident Evil 0 coverage at all.
But it was at E3, of course.
Yeah.
And it's been officially announced for early 2016.
I'm surprised with the length of time it's taking, but on the plus side, it looks even better than the remake. The backgrounds look fabulous.
Yeah. I'd originally questioned the difference between remake and Zero. And Batman had pointed out to me, yeah, you're right, I really noticed this big time when I played it recently, how much additional environmental features there are, movement, wine bottles that, forward and backwards when the train starts moving, just windows opening and forward and all environmental effects. So yeah, that hopefully will look really, really good in HD. The
interesting thing that seems to have happened is, as well, it looks like the original backgrounds were remastered in 16.9. So I'm wondering if you play it with the widescreen mode enabled, will some of the backgrounds in the original version that had like a pan to it, will they just display as full 16.9 now?
Oh yes, there's some scenes, wasn't there, that in the hall, for example, it kind of moved a bit from the pre-rendered.
Now be in a solid state without any movement at all. There won't need to be.
Possibly,
I suppose it will have to be like that.
It went down quite well though, from the impressions that I read. People were quite excited about it.
Did you see the way the setup they clicked expressed?
Yes.
I thought it looked beautiful. The lighting, I thought it looked lovely.
They're definitely using the original assets, aren't they?
Yeah.
It looks far better than remake did.
It shows effort as well, I thought. It shows that they want it to do well. And again, fingers crossed. That'd be the last HD game, wouldn't it?
Well,
apart from Outbreaks. But they won't do them.
They could do a Dead Aim as well, I suppose.
Well, yeah, I was going to say someone mentioned this to me the other day,
I don't think the Outbreak thing's been rumoured, but I can't see it happening. I just don't think it'd be easy to do because in a sense it's just an upscale. But unless they put modern multiplayer, online modes in it, I don't see the point. I don't think it would do very well as a offline thing. I don't know whether they'd front the money up for servers or anything now for it.
See, that's what I would question. I was going to say, but initially I thought in terms graphically and in terms of sales at the time, recognition at the time of sale, I would have said that there's far more chance of Outbreak having the HD remaster rather than Dead Aim, which I kind of think exists on the fringes, isn't it? It's more like a cult classic. If it's just going to be one big headache to release it with the servers, then yeah, without that it's going to be limited gameplay, isn't it? So probably actually less likely that it is going to be released.
Of course, the only other possible scenario is this Final Fantasy VII remake might open a floodgate in Capcom to do 2 and 3.
Oh.
No.
No one thought the Final Fantasy VII thing was ever really going to happen, and now it has. Capcom might go, hey, we can do that.
Do you think it should be teased as one big Raccoon City game?
It happen at all, but...
Oh, no, I completely agree, but if they did, do you think they would combine the two?
Be an opportunity that would save them a lot of resource. If they could design it all as one thing, they could cross some of the content over like the games did. And
they'd make more money if they did it as 2 separate products, though.
Because what I was thinking, but I don't know if it would really work practically, is if it was released as one game and you kind of played through it, 2 and 3 through the timeline. So, you switch from Carlos back to the point in Resident Evil 2 and then back to Resident Evil 3 for the end. Wondering, people we question how would it really be of any benefit just turning it into, sort of an HD update, but it did well for Code Veronica. I think we were all fans of that HD remaster, weren't we?
Yeah, but Code Veronica looked very, very bland in its original incarnation, whereas Resident Evil 2 and 3 still look fine now, I think.
Yeah, and then the thing with Code Veronica was all they had to do was import it into a new engine.
Yeah.
Add some lighting, whereas everything in 2 and 3 would have to be redrawn and redone. It's not just a case of upscaling it.
Okay.
I think we need to think this time next year, which would have been, maybe 4 or 5 months after the release of Zero HD, would have a good understanding of how well that went down with the critics and the fans and whatnot. If it has the same sort of reception as remake, remaster, then I think there may be hints at the next year's E3 as to what may or may not happen with the series going forward.
It also depends on how well received the Final Fantasy VII remake is, because if that launches and it goes tits up and it's not as good as people were hoping it to be, then Capcom might be a bit, maybe there isn't that much demand for it.
You'd have to let me know. I don't know if it's a pure port of Final Fantasy VII but a remake of it.
No, it's a fully fledged remake, but I mean they've said it's not going to be out for some time yet.
But I mean I've never played Final Fantasy ever, so how has the Final Fantasy series evolved from the gameplay of 7 up to what we're up to now, 15?
I think each one does a different thing with its combat system and.
So that's the point. If some people would argue that the archaic system of Resident Evil 1 and 2 are completely outdated, would if they've released 7 as it was with the same control scheme and interface, if you like, would that seem too old?
No, I think they're going to completely modernise it.
And that's what scares me about Resident Evil.
I don't think it'll be. The only thing that'll be recognisable, really, I think in Final Fantasy VII would be the story and the characters. I think everything else will. I think the story beats and everything will be the same. But they've already said that certain content that is in the original game won't carry over because it just doesn't translate to a modern audience, And
but that's the concern, is that if they decide to renounce Resident Evil 2 remake, they're going to ruin so much, to appeal to modern audiences in inverted commas.
Yeah, because we have rocket-powered lipsticks.
Exactly, and it doesn't need it.
I'm going to be interested to see how the item management in Zero goes down with people who never played the original Resident Evil games and who weren't used to the item box system, because obviously we all hate it.
Yep.
But people who've never played the original games, who sort of were introduced to the series from 4 onwards, I'll be interested to see how they find it when it does come out.
Would you think that it will prove more popular to a modern audience than the item boxes? Or?
Well, yeah, I mean, back in 2003 when it came out, we all hated it, didn't we? Because it got rid of the item boxes because that's all we were ever used to.
I only hated it from the point of view that it had so much backtracking connected to it. You needed too many items to bring with you to each new area. And they stupidly made big weapons take up 2 slots. So it just over penalised you for the fact that it was a new system, I think. But a modern audience like you say, without that memory of years and years of item boxes and things, it might take it better, like you say.
The Resident Evil 4 item inventory is still the best, in my opinion.
Yeah, attache case.
Yeah. We do have other news from Japan. Biohazard The Real 3 is now open and will run from the 3rd of July to November the 8th. If everyone remembers the first two that were released at the theme parks and the kind of experiences that you have going through kind of fake Raccoon City. New features, should we say, is implementation of projection goggles to deepen the immersion and will display readouts including the number of bullets left for your gun and your health gauge.
They do put quite a lot of effort into the production values. So I know the Selfish Gene had been, and he'd mentioned things that had surprised me just in terms of some references in the presentation and the decor of the games, and that they seem to almost have more respect and nostalgia for the games than Capcom currently did. I mean, this was before the HD remasters that he'd mentioned it. In the Real 2, there was the setup of Robert Kendo's gun shop, and they had like music playing in the background that you hear in Resident Evil 2 when you go into the gun shop, that sort of thing. And I've not really seen anything yet about 3.
There's simulated blood splatters as well. Always nice, always nice. Yeah, it's a shame that none of the Universal Studios not over here, but around the America get it, because I think it'd be popular. Or they could do, because they do Fright Nights, don't they, at like Thorpe Park and places like that. And I'm surprised there hasn't been a because that's essentially what it is, isn't it? A Fright Night, the real is that sort of thing. They could easily transport it over to Alton Towers. Mahara Desire news.
Where's Newsbot? Where's Newsbot? We need him.
Volume 5 is to be released in English in August.
Oh, I've still got 2 weeks to make it an exclusive. I've got an English translation here. I've just been so lazy about photoshopping it back on because it's Mahara Desire. I've got no desire to bloody do it.
When there has been like Resident Evil 10 that's finally finished off the series storyline, and we're doing the last ever podcast, I genuinely think this will be unfinished. This news feed of this fucking comic.
Well, I think it could be the end. As for the first time, the story will be available in English 3 years after the manga was announced.
It's an effective tie-in to 6, folks. This is. Make sure you read it before playing 6.
Imagine if you made that decision. No, I want to get the whole experience. I'm going to do the prequel.
Oh, are you in for a disappointment?
Yeah. Spoiler alert. And Heavenly Island's been released in French.
Has it? Oh, there we go. Thank you very much.
Keep us entertained. That's news for the next 4 years.
Has there been any more good story beats in that yet?
No.
Oh, wow. Oh my god.
It's awful. I don't know what's wrong with these people in drafting the manga. They're all crap.
It literally is shite, apart from that one redeeming page with mention of Spencer and Umbrella.
There's still knives being thrown at piranhas.
I think there's just the one, to be fair. But there's plenty of time yet.
Have you got your copy back?
Yes.
So it really is disappointing.
It's just all I can't remember the author's name now, but he just delights in drawing girls in bikinis and zooming in on their asses, and that literally is half the content of the book.
Newsbot's writing this?
Yeah.
Has there been any good original manga in the series?
I was going to say it's such a shame because I think it's such a great sort of type of genre.
The prelude to the fall is excellent.
But we've had the Resident Evil 5 one, which was atrocious.
Those were awful. What I still stand by, and I like some of the chapters in them, particularly the ones that really run parallel with Resident Evil 1, 2 and 3, the old Wildstorm Resident Evil Collection 1. There's even a bit with Barry going to see a psychiatrist afterwards for, post-traumatic stress. And
there's a tyrant in the psychiatrist's lab.
That's really gets a bit silly. But, no, some of it. I like, there's even little cameo things, just things as small as, like, Jill stumbling upon John as he's writing his letter to Ada. And just little things like that. Maybe they're not quite canonically, correct, but I like the early one. And then there's Fire and Ice, which is
their trope.
I was going to say, I've got Fire and Ice. It just makes absolutely no sense. It's not just bad; it just doesn't make any sense at all.
Which is the one where it probably is this one, the one where Barry fights Lickers in space.
Oh no, God! There's space BOWs in the Resident Evil 5. Yeah, there is. Which is weird because if you look at the back of the Resident Evil 5 promotional pamphlet thing, Declassified, on the back of that it advertises those Resident Evil 5 comics as portraying Chris's emotional traumas in the lead up to RE5, and sounded really good. I don't know, that must have been a story they completely ditched because obviously we got nothing like that.
Well, it didn't get past the official Newsbot canonometer, so that's why it doesn't get any mention. Whereas the Wicked Sea novel does.
I don't want to be controversial, but I got someone translate that as being slightly different. I think in terms of the title, but I just didn't even mention it.
So what is the title?
While we're talking, I'll find the email again and let it. I just sent it to a Japanese lady, and
So someone with a native tongue.
Yes, they've done translations for me before. I'll look back over my old emails and I'll get it.
That does conclude the news. Moving on now, there's no site news today, folks, so we're going straight on to our main discussion, which is going to be over everyone's favourite Chinese spy, Ada Wong.
The only reason I've taken on this mission is to get closer to my own objective. No matter what happens, I can't let anyone figure that out. Of course, hiding in the shadows isn't my style. I'll have to reveal myself to him and offer advice once in a while.
So the format for this is obviously it's a bit different to our usual brief impression, things like that. We're going to start with a smaller discussion on Separate Ways, which was, in my opinion, one of the best side games in the series, and made me hate buying a GameCube, really, because I was annoyed that it came out firstly as exclusive on the PlayStation 2. An interesting side mission during RE4. We want to open up to the forums as to what everyone thought of it, and did it improve Resident Evil 4 at all? Did it help you understand the Ada background and her involvement with Wesker and things like that? Who wants to start?
I think it single-handedly saved the story of the entire series, even though to this day I still don't understand what the hell is going on in Separate Ways. Obviously, Resident Evil 4, the main storyline was bollocks, and when Capcom announced Separate Ways and they released that trailer and it had Wesker in talking about Leon and stuff, it just straight away made everything more relevant, and it kept the story on the right track. And following the plague as we got in 5 later down the line, Biohazard 4 sits very nicely in the overall storyline now, I think.
There's lots of discussions, of course, during it about her employment status, and that hasn't really changed. I think Capcom made a mistake, though, because when they decided to invent Tricell, to make the leap from S to Seashell to Tricell, that was only done through promotional material, was it not? On a website going Seashell is evil and all that. I think they obviously decided and reneged on the name S and thought we can't call it S.
Yeah, it's a minor mistake, but at least they've addressed it. At least everybody knows now that S is Tricell.
Yes.
It'd have been far worse if it had been one of them little things that they're just conveniently forgotten about.
Did they actually officially clarify that then?
It was the script for Degeneration.
Oh, right.
All the references to Tricell in that script are Seashell.
But then we had reference to the third organisation.
The third organisation is the rival company, Umbrella's rival company.
Mentioned in Resident Evil 2.
Yeah.
The organisation.
No, the organisation is oh.
I'm really confused there.
So many.
The organisation is basically a massive red herring. It's just who Ada is working for in Resident Evil 4. But it's my opinion that Ada works for a different company in every single game in the series.
She's just for hire.
Freelance agent.
Yeah. It's like everyone was talking about the organisation as this massive shadow company who's like integral to the entire series, but that's just not the case, in my opinion.
It's a shame. Obviously, they're a major player, that they just didn't clarify who was the organisation in question, because they could have even just called it Wilfarmer in the end or something like that.
Yeah, well, we all thought when Resident Evil 6 was coming out it was going to be Derek Simmons.
Yes.
Which would have tied in quite nicely, really, but obviously they went down a different path.
Mr. Spencer, what are your views on Separate Ways?
Well, I mean, it helped RE4 makes a bit more sense, and for what it was decent enough. It was good sort of see glimpses of Leon, doing stuff that you did in RE4, but different perspective. Like, I'm pretty sure that in Separate Ways it fills in the plot hole of what happened to Leon's jacket. And there's a Ganado that's wearing his jacket.
That is really good, that.
And I like that.
I love that bit.
Because that would have bugged the fuck out of me.
That's well remembered.
I used to enjoy the first level of Separate Ways, trying to destroy the space-time continuum by chasing down Leon as Ada during the opening chainsaw siege. and destroying the entire timeline, but you can never
I mean,
ever catch him.
So
Can't
that
you,
was your
unless-
goal then, John? Was sort of like, I have to end this madness now. Like, let's go back in time and kill Leon S. Kennedy.
Is that an
Before...
episode of Doctor Who?
It did have striking resemblance, didn't it, to Resident Evil 2 with those kind of intersecting storylines.
Yeah, it did it really well.
It was made, especially with the bell at the beginning. You know, the bingo call was
Yeah.
quite nice, and I mean, it didn't quite. I mean, she did a lot in that small amount of time that Leon was at the village.
Yeah, there's one bit which doesn't converge over well, and it's something to do with when Leon gets knocked out. She only takes a quick jog through the forest, and Leon's already broken free, had his chat with Lewis and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think there's a questionable time jump, and I don't like the bit where she gets tranquilised and then has the sacrifice, because they evidently needed a way to make the time jump like it does in Leon's when he falls unconscious. After the lake battle, and they needed something for Ada, so they just knock her out. I mean, they'd have just killed her. It just makes no sense.
Also, in separate ways, of course, we had the new area in the battleship.
Yeah, I don't know if I like that really, because it's questionable where a small cult like the Los Illuminados would get like a massive warship.
And it also raised questions as to where roughly it was set in Spain, because you never got the impression it was on the coast. Only right at the very end, I suppose. But I don't know, it felt
Castle's
weird.
on the coast, isn't it?
Was it actually on the coast? I thought it was just on...
Leon takes a boat to the island.
Oh yeah, he does take the boat. No. Yeah, but no, I don't know, it kind of had the impression of a whacking Great Lake.
Yeah, that's kind of the impression I got at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like you saying, only at the end on the jet ski thing, it kind of feels more open water.
Yeah, that was the impression, you know, because it certainly was kind of northern Spain. And I remember, who was it with? Project Omega, I think it was. I think going back in the day, I think we scoured the northern maps of Spain to try and locate, to try and find a place that had a whacking Great Lake, as well as being right on the coast. It's somewhere near Bilbao or Santander, because it's the only likely place where it has that climate. But that was the good old days. I did note it. I remember playing, because the first time I ever played it through was on the Wii version, and it is quite evident, especially when you fight Salazar at the end, that it was ported from the PlayStation 2 version as opposed to the GameCube. There's this one scene where after Leon's fought him in that room before he mutates, he then turns around and faces Ada, and it suddenly goes really kind of not blurry but more pixely. The kind of cutscene quality dramatically drops for a split second.
Cutscenes are the biggest letdown.
Yeah.
They're still old, like, you know, DVD footage. They were done as FMV files, the separate ways cutscenes.
Right.
In the HD version, they haven't upscaled them, so they just look like a very standard definition.
Oh, that's unfortunate. But it's a good illustration of the difference between GameCube and PlayStation 2 at the time. It's a shame that they didn't, as you said, they didn't bother to upscale them. George Trevor, what's your views?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Ada Wong, and so I really enjoyed her compliment and the way that, you know, you kind of interjected into the timeline, and you could, you know, kind of see what was going on in the background, you know, interlocking events, like you say, similar to Resident Evil 2. I would have preferred to have had that entwined into the main game rather than have the character swap that you had with Ashley. Yeah, so it kind of would have, you know, in a kind of a throwback to Resident Evil 2 thing, would have been great to have finally played as Ada. But yeah, I think it really added, kind of made Resident Evil 4, because I always waver, I can never make up my mind about that as a game. But I think it definitely, I think it's definitely a valuable addition.
So what's everyone's views on separate ways with Assignment Ada?
It's just a little bonus mini game, really, isn't it?
I don't class Assignment Ada as canon in any way.
But doesn't it have her extract the Plaga?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the only bit you could theoretically take from it is the last bit on the helicopter, which you don't see in Separate Ways, where she actually does talk to Wesker. If you were to cut together a movie of all the cutscenes, which I think some people have done, you could chuck Assignment Ada Last Cinema at the end of the Separate Ways campaign, and it would still work. And you would get Wesker's motive.
Yeah. Is there no official confirmation that Assignment Ada is canon other than that video at the end?
I mean, well, theoretically you could have it, because she's running around picking up the individual Plaga samples, isn't it? Or is it the Assignment Ada scene at the end where she opens the case and you can see all the little samples in the box? I can't remember now.
I remember having a discussion at the time, because I remember it could still work within Separate Ways' timeline.
Yeah, there is a jump, because the one bit, and it always bothered me this about Separate Ways, The one bit they don't cross over with Leon's campaign is the moment she takes him to the island in the boat.
Yes.
You're not shown that event in separate ways. It always bothered me that.
And that's when Assignment Ada kicks off, doesn't it?
Yeah, because she runs onto the island and then Wesker communicates with her.
Just randomly changed her clothes.
Yeah. The only reason the only reason they did that was because they couldn't get the dress physics to work on the GameCube version or something.
Really?
So that's why they had to give her a different outfit. Yeah, you know, for the in-game model.
Yeah.
They couldn't get the dress physics to work until the PS2 version.
Wow.
But I did like some of the crossover sections they did have in separate ways. Like when you're fighting mutated Krauser on the rooftops, you can still hear Leon on the floor shooting all the Ganado, stuff like that.
And you get Krauser's death in it, don't you?
Oh yes, because he doesn't die. Yeah.
His heart actually sort of explodes and his arm shrivels up, which is something it didn't do in Leon's.
Then you get to fight Sadler in his human form, don't you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, is that where you cause damage by stabbing him in the eye?
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, it's very
Little
difficult, isn't it? Yeah.
That fight to me seemed a lot more scarier than when you fight Sadler in his big form, because it was a small room, there's weird, creepy ambience, and he's just following you around.
Yeah, and doesn't he, at the last moment, come up very fast on you? Yeah, I preferred that to the last boss battle.
He's got a big charge, he charges you, and...
But like you say, it was quite tense. Yeah, I've criticised RE4 in the past for not actually feeling genuine fear and tension like with the past games, but that's definitely a moment where I did.
I think RE4, generally, the final boss battle was a real disappointment, considering how some of them were quite good and inventive, such as Mendez in the hut I thought was quite good. And
yes, I like Mendez in the hut.
Yeah, and Salazar was a bit different to what we'd seen at the time.
He's only 20 years old.
Mr. Scott Kennedy.
He's
what have I done?
Just creepiest. I love him. It's such a creepy, weird.
It may surprise you, but I'm only 20 years old.
It just seemed a real disappointment, I thought, for Salazar's boss battle, because it's really, really easy.
It reminds me of what's his name in 5?
Irving.
Irving's battle is a bit of a homage to that. The way he emerges from the mouth of a big thing is still as a sort of humanoid that's melded into the sea creature.
So it was good to see Wesker back, because it wasn't the last voice acting of old Richard Waugh. That his last gig.
Yep.
And that was his, not quite the grand send off perhaps, but it was.
I thought it was fairly masterstroke of them in Umbrella Chronicles to actually have him end up in that little command centre place, which is where he spends all his time in 4. I thought it was nifty.
Yeah, it was a nice tie in that, because when you first play Separate Ways, it made no sense why Wesker was in control of Umbrella's satellite system.
Yeah, it did a good job with that.
Well, as you said, Separate Ways was the first of the rebuilding job of the storyline.
Yeah.
Which started with Separate Ways and probably ended with RE5, really, didn't it? But it had Umbrella Chronicles in between and whatnot. So, yeah, it was good. Trying to think of a really enjoyable moment, though, of Separate Ways.
I mean, if you strip the game down, it was fairly routine. There was nothing new there, was there? It was just...
No, I can't remember if there was anything really memorable.
It was mainly just to help the story, really, I think.
It wasn't quite as mundane as Desperate Escape from RE5.
Oh no, definitely not.
That was pretty dull, but then it wasn't as good as Lost in Nightmares.
Nothing. I mean, that's the pinnacle of DLC to date, without a shadow of a doubt.
She had to fight the Bella sisters a few times, though, didn't she? In Separate Ways.
Yeah, they have the key, don't they, for the church? Yeah.
That was it. Yeah.
Or the jewel, something like that.
You have to do some of the puzzles backwards now, don't you? And you actually set the gems that Leon has to cut at.
Yeah, that's right.
Leon will come and collect.
Little things like that. Okay, I think I can conclude our Separate Ways mini discussion when I move on to the main discussion, which is back to our kind of normal layout, if you like, of a podcast. So this is focusing generally on Ada Wong and her general motivations from the time we knew in our RE1, she was, I suppose, first mentioned, all the way up to RE6.
What's the news on our friend Leon?
He's not making it easy. The sample?
Sadler's got it. It seems he sniffed out our little game.
Perfect.
Just so we understand each other clearly, I don't trust you, nor does Wesker. If you try to do anything clever, I will kill you.
Is that so? I met Wesker long before you.
We'll see soon enough if you did.
Yeah, we'll see.
What are your views of the character generally? Let's start with you, Stars Tyrant.
I think for modern Resident Evil, as much as she is an enigma and it's frustrating, we've still not had any kind of resolution about her, even with the opportunity they had in 6. I think she's the single saving grace of the sort of later franchise. The only reason it remains to be kind of interesting with its mysteries. I think she's a great character, and I think she's been wonderfully portrayed. I like the fact that she's sort of in controlling she's sort of taken over from Spencer in a sense, in that he was the puppeteer of the earlier games. He was always the presence in the background that was kind of, the result of everything, and she's definitely that. She sort of inherited that in the later games. She seems to be the only one that truly is aware of what's going on, and she seems to have kind of influence over the story in a way, in the direction it goes in. And I just reiterate, I've said it countless times on these casts, I really do love that last little bit in 6 where just for a second you get to see the woman that is underneath the cool exterior, where she nearly loses it when she's shooting up the lab. I think it's really good characterization, but at the same time 6 was a frustrating experience, because I think we all thought when they announced she was going to have a separate campaign which you unlock at the end, it was going to be the big reveal. You're actually going to get the history of her, maybe some flashbacks, and the thing that worries me about her as a character, and this is where I'll finish my little bit, is I genuinely don't think Capcom know her story, and that's what worries me. I think they genuinely don't know which way to take this character. I think the people who originally sketched her up, when they crafted her on a piece of paper or whatever, I don't think they're with us anymore within Capcom, and I don't think notes have been passed along for the future developers.
Yeah.
And I just think it's someone I think has got the trouble of actually having to think, if we're going to try and close aspects of the series off in 7, what are we going to do with this character if we even include her at all, and thus prolong this agony for us, the fan base, even longer.
I think it's intrinsically different to Wesker's scenario, because at any point he could just be the main villain of the game and they could do the usual mutate and kill him off, no problems, no questions asked. But because she's not inherently evil, she's villainous but not a villain, and she's, as you said, quite a complex character, they don't know what to do. Anyway, what's your views, Mr. Spencer?
On Ada Wong as a character?
Yes, briefly, yes.
I think she's overrated, and I think that she's very... People say she's complicated. She's not really. She's just there when the plot calls for it. And it's like, oh, I'm going to be all smug and just be like, hey, I seem to know everything and be in the right place. She is the Resident Evil equivalent of Brienne of Tarth. She's just there when she needs to be. Just there for the social justice worries and the feminists. I couldn't give a shit. Hunk, however, Hunk's a great character. He needs more exposure. So on that bombshell, fuck Ada Wong, bring back Hunk. Next question.
George, how are you going to respond to this?
Oh, I can't follow that.
Well,
that
this is like an
was
episode
brilliant.
of Kilroy.
That's strange. I don't know what that says about me, because I was completely disagreeing with John as he started that rant, but I enjoyed it so much by the end. I was like, I'm with you, brother.
George, your impressions of Ada Wong?
Well, when I first came across her, I just thought it was just fantastic that somebody that wasn't the main playable protagonist had just such a strong character and quite an interesting little backstory that wasn't really generic and just stereotypical. I quite liked that, and found myself almost feeling sorry for the betrayal of John. And Sean's absolutely right what he says, how she's ended up, and I think the reason for that is just all these years almost in the wilderness, not in the wilderness, but all these directionless years where no one at Capcom, and again this goes back to not having a consistent team led by an inspirational figure with talent and bravery, that no one at Capcom has known what to do with her or has utilized. I do disagree with what John said at the beginning of that, because I do like her as a character, and I think she's really valuable to the series, and sometimes has been the only redeeming not the only redeeming feature, but has really kind of held it up as something more than just a bit stereotypical or generic. But yeah, such a shame that Capcom didn't develop the character from such fantastic start with RE2. RE4 wavered a bit, but then by the time we got to RE6 it was just a joke what they've done with her.
Batman?
Yeah, Ada Wong, she's not one of my favourite characters, but for me, she was at her most interesting when she was ambiguous, as in there was potential there for her to be a bad guy. And I would have liked her to be not necessarily flat out evil like Wesker was, but someone who didn't have the best intentions for the world, but yet she still had this relationship with Leon, who's fundamentally one of the good guys. But that's what
I was
could
just
have
saying,
made.
you were saying how, like, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but you were saying how she was quite an ambiguous character and you preferred her to be that ambiguous character. Don't you feel that Nikolai is kind of like that? He's not necessarily outright evil, per se. He's kind of ambiguous.
Is he?
Oh, I think he's pretty bad.
I think he's
totally
pretty evil.
betrays it. Yeah.
What's ambiguous about him?
All right, go back to fan wanking over Ada Wong.
No, go on. What's ambiguous about Nikolai? What's his good qualities?
Well, all right, okay. I didn't really plan that one out, but Hunk is more ambiguous.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I just mean like how in 6, for example, you could tell Capcom toyed with the idea of making her evil, and then I thought, no, we can't do that. We best play it safe and create a clone, an evil clone instead. Whereas it would have been much more interesting if, she was this bad guy, but she still had feelings for Leon, and Leon tried to protect her, even though he knew she was working for the bad guys. I think they pissed that away in Resident Evil 6. But I'll just echo what Sean says. I mean, yeah, I don't think Capcom know where they're going with her. And whatever resolution we do get, it won't be what was originally intended for the character.
We must just quickly say we must be grateful for Small Mercies as well, because if anyone can remember, the original plan for her in 6 was to have each previous iteration of her in each game a different clone.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Which would have been a series killer.
Yeah, definitely.
What about
Right.
you, Nick? What do you think?
I found her in Resident Evil 2 is obviously this kind of intriguing character, and I thought she was quite a good counterpoint to Claire's goody two-shoe motherly approach. And because you kind of grow quite fond of her through playing as Leon, and then she just stabs you in the back, just runs away, doesn't do a lot. She knows stuff, she's not telling you, but then she helps you. Then she helps you with the rocket launcher, and you're like, okay, that's cool. She leaves you asking questions, and I suppose throughout the series that's always been quite successful. RE4, you're left asking a lot of questions, even though she answered quite a few. I felt her biggest disappointment may have even been in Damnation, because I don't think her portrayal in that added anything to her character. And RE4, rightly or wrongly, added more to it, whereas you had a whole film that had a really good opportunity to delve into her character a bit more, especially with the kind of bitch off with the president. I thought that was quite interesting, and again, it shows how important she is in this series because people know her and have heard of her, and she's clearly a big deal rather than this lowly spy. So I was disappointed the way it's going because I think up to RE4, I think she was quite cool and intriguing, and I think she's losing this appeal as it goes on, and they've kind of made her to be this really big, important character when you never quite got that impression, even at RE4. You just kind of thought that she was kind of someone for hire by Wesker. And that worked quite nicely, but I think RE6 especially made her to be super important, and you never kind of got that impression in RE2. I didn't find anyway.
When we first knew she was coming back in 4, I didn't understand why. I thought there was absolutely no need to bring Ada back, because just for the reasons you said, Nick. She didn't feel like she was an important cog in the overall machine.
No, and they've upped her ante over the years, but I think the RE4 level was a good level of kind of, she's been hired by Wesker to get the Plaga, then she stabs him in the back, and that was quite nice because not many people get one over Wesker.
But it's always bugged me though how Wesker's never seemingly done anything about that.
No.
Yeah, you'd have thought he would have.
Plot armor for Ada.
Yeah.
There've always missed opportunities with the character as well. I think, I think one of the things a lot of us were looking forward to when they announced she was going to be in 4 was going to be to see Leon's reaction to her being alive, and that was done off screen. By the time they actually do meet each other in game, Leon is well aware, and there's no dramatic payoff from that, and there's further inconsistencies the more you go into the story. Like, I just cannot believe the amount of interaction that Chris and Leon would have had. I just can't believe that after 15 years of her, first being introduced in 1998, Chris has never heard of her, and there's never been a discussion or a conversation about her. even from Claire. Claire has met Ada before. Surely she would have spoken to Chris.
Has she?
About, they have a brief interaction in 2, don't they?
Do they?
Don't they?
No,
my
they
memory's
no, they
completely
don't.
failing me.
You're thinking of Dark Side Chronicles.
I'm thinking of Dark Side.
Oh.
But God, see, look what that game has done. Tainted my own memory.
But regardless, Leon would have spoken to Claire. How did you survive it? Oh, I had the help of no one. I did it all on myself. Obviously, he would have said.
Maybe he did it. He kept her secret safe, like to protect her in his own way because he loved her.
Yeah,
that would be better. And that's another thing. Like they in the trailers they set up, they always underuse the potential of the character, because obviously the Resident Evil 6, the big hook in the trailer was Chris versus Leon, and the fact that the character of Ada is going to cause a massive conflict between these two characters. And one will want to protect her, one will want to kill her, and all it amounts to in the long run is a 2-minute cutscene. Or that's the entire potential of that scenario is just pissed away in one exchange. They could have based the whole game around that conflict.
They did. More
interesting than what we got.
But that's what I was talking about earlier. I mean, it's not even Ada. It's the clone, isn't it? They're fighting over.
Yeah. But they do. But Leon doesn't know that at the time.
I know, but
it could have been Ada though.
Yeah, it could have. It should have been Ada.
Yeah, it should have been Ada. Yeah.
I don't understand the need.
But how much more fascinating would it have been, though, given all we know about her in the series, if they had just said, yeah, fuck it, let's make Ada head of Neo Umbrella in 6, rather than just a clone.
Would that have worked? I mean...
Well, I just think it's fascinating. If she sort of took over the mantle as the main series villain, yet she still had this, on-off relationship with Leon, whose sole purpose is to stop all this evil bioterrorism stuff.
Yeah,
just the conflict, yeah.
And then the story between Chris and Leon would have really fireworked into something really good.
Exactly.
Because the series would have never gone there before.
And imagine that if he, at the end of it, he realizes that he's going to be the one that he ends up killing her in the end. He's like, I love you, but I can't let you do this. And he's got a gun aimed at her, and you really feel like some kind of emotional shit going down in there, and conflict within him, and he's the one that ends up pulling the trigger on her. That would have had a lot of emotion.
They could have even done like an MGS3 homage where you have to pull the trigger, the boss.
I'd have happily pulled the trigger in that case because I hate Ada.
So I suppose the answer to the question, is she a key player in the series? I think she has become it, and she's kind of taken over Wesker's mantle as being
shoehorned into it, rather I should say, because hey, it's a female character, so all the beta males and feminists will flock to her. There we go, we got that market audience.
But then I suppose they've got this unbridled desire to keep the name Wesker floating around for some reason, versus as I said, their growing affection, if you like, for Ada to be more important. It goes back to Sean's point. Do they know what they're doing? Obviously, they want to keep some Wesker alive, and I predict now that a Wesker of some sort.
You see, they should have had Alex Wesker as the leader of the other thing, and actually Ada's true employer.
Yeah, that would have been ridiculously good.
Which is why she backstabbed him. It could have worked.
2 months had passed since the mansion incident. To regain everything that I had lost in my new organization, I joined hands with Ada Wong, a female agent who was also sent to spy on Umbrella.
Identify yourself. Ada Wong. Ada Wong. I've heard that name before.
I think she stayed fairly consistent in this kind of spy role, and I think she was perfect in 4, aside from the exploding lipstick and the sunglasses and all that crap. I think her level of intrigue at Resident Evil 4 was at its absolute peak, and she certainly generated a lot of discussion after the game, which I think helped RE4 in the long run. I would agree with Bats that RE6 was awful from a storyline perspective. And I think you're right. I'm not quite sure where they can go from here in order to get a satisfactory outcome that dedicated fans like ourselves will go, oh yeah, I like that. Because I don't know where they can really go. And I said we shall see. But I do like her as a character generally. I think she's one of the more well-rounded characters because she does get a lot of screen time, and perhaps Mr. Spencer is right. She has been slightly oversaturated. But I think even from her nondescript appearance in, say, Damnation, I think, although it didn't add to her story, added to the intrigue a bit more, which is what made RE6 even more disappointing, because it didn't do anything. and it should have done, especially after the teaser trailer, which showed that teaser of that potential conflict between Chris and Leon over Ada, which would have been a perfect end to it, but never mind. So I suppose a key question is whether she is a big player in the series now, and we can look at her timeline in a bit more detail and a bit later, but I think, Batman, you touched upon whether she's good or bad in terms of her affiliation.
Well, like I said, I think it was better when it was much more ambiguous, because every game she's in, she always goes on about her ultimate motivation and how it's imperative that remains a secret. It seems to be, in 6, the Japanese files anyway, seem to hint that she's infiltrated the highest levels of the BOW underworld, whatever that is. And to be honest, I genuinely don't know where they can go with it, because we've lost Wesker and we've lost Derek Simmons, and they were the two people that she sort of played off against. And to be honest, I'm clueless as to where they can go. And it wouldn't surprise me if Capcom ultimately can't decide what to do with her and simply kill her off, saving Leon's life or something pointless like that, as a way of saving themselves having to explain the full motivations of this character, because I just don't think they have a clue.
No, I'd agree with that. I think when the promo for 6 was happening,
yep.
And we found out she was going to feature in the storyline quite heavily, and then there was the announcement that she's going to have her own campaign that unlocks at the end, and you're going to learn things about her and see things from her perspective. I think everyone was thinking, this is great. We're finally going to learn what makes the character work and everything, and they just do nothing with her. It's just a waste of time. Remember, we just said one of the biggest problems story-wise with 6 is that every character enters it and leaves, the same, and that goes with Ada as well. We know nothing about her at all, even though you learn little bits about her backstory with Simmons. That doesn't amount to anything. It's nothing really to do with her.
Are we being a bit disingenuous though? I mean, we were slightly concerned with Wesker and his viral collection program that seemed to litter all the games, and then out comes Capcom with Resident Evil 5, which from a storyline perspective completely wrapped up Wesker's involvement in Umbrella and other corporations since 1991 all the way up to 2000 and whatever the year RE5's at. And, they can do it. Could they possibly pull an RE5 out of the bag?
Well, I think I've said this before. I fully expected that's what 6 would be like. Because, like you said, Resident Evil 5 finally answered all the questions relating to the sort of Chris, Jill, Wesker and Umbrella plotline. And I fully expected 6 to do the same for the Leon, Ada, Sherry, US government plotline. But Capcom bottled it.
Certainly her ambiguity has always been an intriguing factor. And I think, as I said earlier, Resident Evil 4 was a prime example of that. And, we've already discussed Separate Ways a bit earlier on. And I like that aspect, and as I said, I do think it's a disappointment that we didn't get it. And the way Capcom are going at the moment with their kind of re-releases of classic games and the general positivity that's been received in the community, both old and new fans, it might suggest that they're going to go in RE7, whenever it gets announced, to be far more, less ambitious, should we say, than what RE6 was, which was almost a worldwide outbreak of a virus.
Yeah.
And it would take a big storyline to reveal all of Ada's intentions. And as I said, I'm not sure whether they'll be able to contain and explain Ada's involvement with what must be up to maybe 4 or 5 organizations in a small kind of, RE1 style isolated setting. If you take Revelations 2, for example, that only dealt with Alex Wesker and her involvement with Spencer and Umbrella, and that felt fairly organic. Whereas you think if there was like a small outbreak on a little island or something like that, just like in Revelations 2, and suddenly you're confronted with Ada, who then goes, well, I did this, and and goes through all her kind of connections to whatever organisation. I can't help that it would feel extremely forced, and I think even in Revelations 2 it felt a bit forced with all the Terra Grigia kind of hints and nods throughout. Although great for the fans, it was just like, it's a bit in your face at times. I just wonder that perhaps Ada's finale, whenever it may be, does need quite a grandiose finishing off, if you like, in order to deal with all the various plot points that still hang over her. So what we could do is have a quick discussion over a timeline, because obviously Resident Evil 6 brings into the fold Simmons and his involvement with the kind of sterilization program and all that. So the start of Ada's timeline kind of begins in 1998, when she's definitely working for Derek Simmons, and we get those files in RE6 which shows they're fairly close relationship, I would feel. And that was always a fairly interesting point throughout the game, but was never really, I don't think, utilised to its maximum potential.
Was it explained in 6 what Simmons is doing in 1998? I'm assuming he's still working for the government, but I can't imagine he'd be National Security Advisor.
He did advise on the bomb, though, didn't he?
Yes, he did, yeah.
Yeah.
But Ada was obviously working for Simmons, and she was obviously working for Umbrella's rival company at the same time, because she infiltrated the mansion, didn't she?
Yep. And gets close to old John.
Yeah. But she did that for Umbrella's rival. She wasn't doing that for Derek Simmons, so I don't think it has been expanded on what kind of work she was doing for him.
No. Unlikely to be BOW related either.
Possibly. I don't know.
I mean, it's all still very covert at that point with Umbrella. There was no outbreaks apart from the little mini one in 93.
Saving that gap in the timeline to fill in with a side story title.
I suppose Umbrella was still working closely with the US government at that time, weren't they? So.
Is there a confidential report that can shed light?
I'm sure there will be. But what about, because we still don't know what rival company that was, and then of course that ties in with Resident Evil 4 as to her affiliations and.
Well, obviously we all know the rival company was never really expanded on. It was never named.
No.
But Ada worked for them during the Mansion incident and during the Raccoon City incident. And then she buggered off and did her own thing, which I think is what the epilogue in Resident Evil 3 hints at. And then I think it's Archives 2 says that Wesker rehired her for the rival company in 2004, just before the last Plagas incident. But it's interesting because I think we've said before that Ada Wong's not a real name. And I think Ada Wong was the alias she used when she was working for the rival company. Because in her epilogue in Resident Evil 3 she says, I'm going to say goodbye to that name, I'm not going to use it anymore. But obviously they sort of scrapped that idea because they've used it ever since.
Yeah.
So during Raccoon City incident, she was still working for the same organisation, which presumably was the same organisation that Wesker sold out to.
Yeah.
Wesker was tasked as a result of his failure to get the Tyrant battle data they wanted.
Yeah, and I think you have to assume that Wesker got the rival company a sample of the T-virus because it's implied anyway that once the outbreak happened at the mansion that Ada just sort of fled.
Yeah.
If you look in the Japanese materials, I think it was John, the chief researcher John, that told Ada about the development of the G-virus. And obviously that's what led to her being paired with Wesker to recover it from William Birkin's lab in Resident Evil 2.
Yes, and she did, and we see that in Death's Door. Well, before we do Death's Door, we can talk about her involvement with Leon during 1998 and the dynamics that he had with her, especially in RE2, which I think despite the voice acting, I think by the end was fairly genuine, and I think it was actually quite convincing. And I think that was probably helped with the musical score in the background, with especially when Leon's injures his arm. I think that scene's quite a nice scene, and he does, and she does feel obviously quite strongly towards him, and that itself was quite a marked difference actually from Death's Door, where she's kind of this hardline super spy, wherein I suppose in her little mini scenarios in RE2 she's just kind of like delicately walking around, but she's got a bit of venom in her, with her abilities as a spy. But there's a marked difference, I think, within the same environments. But
that's what made her interesting at the time. I mean, like you say, she's firmly established now as a good guy, but yet she was the one who effectively gave the G-virus to Wesker. You have to wonder why she would do such things.
Yes, and I think, especially when you saw Death's Door for the first time, I think that was quite a good moment to see those two working together. And you were like, yeah, you are a baddie, but I like you because you're quite nice to Leon, and Leon's a goodie. And as you said at the beginning, that kind of ambiguity was actually quite a good plot thread to carry on. And sadly it wasn't. John, your thoughts?
On Ada Wong?
On Ada's involvement in RE2, especially.
I liked her more in RE2 and RE6 because she was mysterious. I didn't know what her role was and what she was doing. But in RE6, it was not as good. It was just too obvious. I wasn't a fan of it.
what did you think with Wesker's involvement with Ada, and did you think that flowed fairly naturally?
Well, we saw it coming. We knew that, she was going to be around with Wesker.
Actually, no, I'm saying we found that in Umbrella Chronicles. We didn't, of course. We found that out in also in Wesker's report.
Well, I guess it kind of fits, but then there's a whole third organisation, and I think
we'll
that's
get to
more
that,
interesting than her deals with Wesker.
Well, from what I understand, Wesker, because he failed in getting all the information, he had to kind of make it up to his new organisation, whatever that may be, and therefore get the G virus. So, as it said, it kind of made sense that she kind of bummied up with Wesker, or Wesker bummied up with her, should we say, to try and get it because of her information and connections with John. So, as I said, it did make for interesting dialogue. I'm not sure whether Death's Door kind of dealt with that properly, as it was all a bit over the top with slingshots and hook shots, should I say, and got a bit silly.
It got a bit over the top in Umbrella Chronicles.
And then we have the interesting moment where in Death's Door, of course, where she fights the... I won't say this too loud, where she fights the Tyrant from Outbreak 2. But it was definitely not the Outbreak 2 Tyrant, even though it was exactly the same, in exactly the same place. It was clearly the escaped Tyrant from God knows when, that's never ever mentioned.
I thought it had been established it was the Outbreak Tyrant.
Oh, it has, but...
Oh, you're being sarcastic. My
I was being...
apologies. My apologies.
Lost over the internet, yes. No, absolutely, yeah. That was an interesting boss fight, I suppose.
What is the official consensus on that? Because I always like to think it is.
Yeah, it is.
But in the Umbrella Chronicles guidebook, the Japanese guidebook as well, it's referred to as the Outbreak Tyrant.
Yes, or the Tyrant R, I think it was.
It makes perfect sense to me. When he climbs the building in Outbreak File 2, he's seems exhausted from combat, and I just always assumed it was, Ada's beating of him, and then that's why Nyx grabs him.
Because in Outbreak you fight the Tyrant on the street, don't you, first?
Yeah, and then obviously Ada fights him on the highway.
Yeah, and then he kind of collapses, and then presumably then it has to be inferred that he kind of then falls over the edge.
Mm.
And then when the Outbreak survivors get back onto that ledge, you see him crawl back up, and then the Nyx absorbs him. I always thought it made perfect sense, but there was...
It's a bit of a stretch that you have to sort of put it together, but I mean, I think it's one of those... It's a neat little thing, if you're happy to accept it. It's a nice bit of cross-chronology.
Yes.
I know some people on the internet that they don't want to accept it as being the same thing, but to be honest, it hurts nothing even if it is.
Exactly, yeah.
It's one of those cool little plot points that if you want it to be connected, it can be, and it actually makes less sense if it doesn't, because it just means there's another Tyrant running around.
Yeah, because I think in the files there is an unaccounted for Tyrant.
Oh, is there?
I think so.
I can't remember. Is there really?
Yeah.
I think
What, of the 6 that Sergei drops?
No, there's if I can remember correctly, I think, the photograph files you can get in Resident Evil 2?
Yeah.
I think there's one of a T-103, like a Super Tyrant T-103 in a tank in the lab. Yeah. And obviously when you get there in the game, the tank's smashed and it's not there, implying that it's got out. I think that's it. I can't quite remember, to be honest.
Yeah, I think you're on the right lines, or something like that, I remember. But, of course, I think my argument at the time was that it's clearly the Outbreak Tyrant. It looks the same, and if it had been the Super Tyrant, it would have been the Super Tyrant. I didn't understand. It's like,
it definitely is its own mutation, the Outbreak one, isn't it? It's a unique style one, very top-heavy mutation.
Exactly, and whilst I took the point that the hunters that you fight in Death's Door, especially, aren't hunter alphas, but hunter betas, but they've got the skin of the alpha. I was happy to accept that, but I think because they're not a hunter alpha. Well, they are hunter alphas. That's the same model.
It's just the Outbreak lickers, isn't it?
No, it says hunters in it because it's the hunter.
Oh, hunters. Sorry, yeah. Sorry.
Gets her bloody shoot, isn't it? As she jumps onto the.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, but it can't. Hunter alphas weren't in the 121 alphas weren't in the Raccoon City Outbreak. The only ones that were running around were either the Outbreak ones, which were the 125s, or the 121 betas. So.
Well remembered.
Thank you.
This is the Nick who could wipe the floor in the quiz, isn't he?
But they did the same. They said, the Hunter Delta, for example, was exactly the same skin as the Hunter Alpha, but it was a bit different, and they show the Hunter Delta in the Prelude to the Fall manga, and that's the only real official artwork of it.
He lost his will and chose death. He was weak.
Wesker.
And you, Ada, you have also failed. Your actions in betraying us and helping that Leon fellow will have consequences for our organization.
See this? It's a tissue fragment with Birkin's G virus.
Well, despite some setbacks, you have proven your value to us. Ada, there are two things you must be made aware of. One, in just moments, Raccoon City will be completely eradicated by a government-launched missile. And two, an Umbrella officer will be leaving town in a helicopter. If you are not on it, there will be no way to leave Raccoon City. It is in our best interest that you survive. The G-virus sample is required.
If the T virus did this, what would happen if the G virus got out?
Okay, so I just want to, if we touch on the RE3 epilogue, then interestingly, I think Batsy's already touched upon it. Actually, has this kind of change of heart, but then obviously has another U-turn, more U-turns than the Tory government, it seems, about. Yes, we'll get political on this podcast about keeping the Ada Wong name going. So much so that she was quite reckless in it, as by the time RE4 takes place, Leon quizzed her about, so it's true you are working with Wesker, not true you're alive.
Yeah, and that's what I alluded to, that the disappointment of events being told off screen.
Because, as I said, that could have been a proper defining moment where he's about to be killed by Sadler or whoever.
I remember the build-up to Resident Evil 4. I remember I was one of those sort of early people who wrote it off because I didn't like what they'd done with the removal of Umbrella in the opening cutscene. I didn't like the idea of a cult or Sadler, and it was getting to grips with the lack of zombies and stuff, and it was actually the relationship between Leon and Ada, which was one of the reasons I was invested in playing the game. And the first moment they have that sort of square off, and she kicks the gun out of his hand, and I just thought we're going to get a really awesome moment here.
Yep. And
he just says, "Oh yeah, it's true. You're working with Wesker." I was like, "What? Why aren't you saying, 'Holy fuck, you're alive'?" It was just such a poor payoff.
Oh, so you did survive. You did give me the rocket launcher or whatever it was gonna.
Yeah. It was real. It just again, the disappointment of 4 carried on.
It just seemed such a big jump, didn't it? As you said, it was that moment of, as you said, not that you're alive, but you're alive and you're suddenly working with the big bad from the series. Who I think at that point we hadn't even known Wesker was involved in RE4.
No.
I think that's the first mention that he's in the game. So suddenly, Wesker, and again, it just kind of shows the fanboyism that Capcom were trying to create with Wesker by making him, the number one person, and let's team him up with Ada. And I don't think they got their priorities right with that, because they could have had that scene a bit later on in the game. They could have had that reunion scene where perhaps Leon thinks, she's come to save my life, thank God for that. And then suddenly, she, I don't know, punches him in the stomach and gets out of there because she's got a job to do. And then you kind of have that kind of heartbreak. And then when he meets up with her again, then it's, you're working for fucking Albert Wesker, aren't you?
Put your hands where I can see them.
Sorry, but following a lady's lead just isn't my style.
Put them up now.
Bit of advice, try using knives next time. Works better for close encounters.
Leon. Long time no see.
Ada. So it is true.
True? About what?
You, working with Wesker.
I see you've been doing your homework.
Why, Ada?
What's it to you?
Why are you here? Why'd you show up like this?
See you around.
Ada!
This is why we've alluded to this evening already, why Separate Ways salvages the story of 4 quite dramatically. Because the vanilla Resident Evil 4 is a very hollow experience in terms of storytelling and characters.
Even with Assignment Ada at the end.
Yeah.
It doesn't flesh it out as much as it needs to because of Separate Ways and the report at the Ada's report at the end, especially how she details the kind of conflict that she has.
To me, her appearance in 4 is simply because Mikami, because I believe he is the writer to that game, clearly couldn't come up with a series building aspect of conspiracy, so he just threw Ada in and thought, well, she's kind of mysterious, she'll do, but had no idea how she really should be integrated into the story. Because, forgive me if I'm wrong, isn't Separate Ways written by someone completely different?
I think it was, yeah.
And so evidently someone else has come along and actually made that
fixed
connection and worked it out. That she's actually is there for a reason, not just there because I need a spy character in this game to give the story some substance. And, people can speculate on the mystery. Oh, we'll just put Ada in there. And then we'll do a throwaway mention to Wesker.
Yeah.
Just to keep it all just continuing just a little bit longer.
No, you're right. The GameCube version, if you like, of the storyline is quite hollow in that sense. In the same way that I suppose Revelations 2 does with a lot of nods to previous games. I suppose that's exactly what Ada's role in RE4 GameCube version is. Oh, look, it's Leon. He's back. Oh, he had a thing with Ada Wong. Let's put her in. And she works for Wesker. Remember him from Code Veronica? Yeah.
And the fans will go crazy speculating over it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's evidently they knew when they came around to doing the PS2 version with the additional content, they knew that's the hook they had to play on to get people to sort of double dip.
Yes.
Because they knew the fans, that's the sort of stuff they'll be invested in. And they marketed it wonderfully by using some of the big moments of the, I remember one of the huge lines they dropped in the trailer for the PS2 version was that he's a survivor of Raccoon City. And
yes, I remember that. Yeah, that was good.
So it's always sad when a sort of, well, I mean, we've already said this evening, I'm not going to go back into it more, but Separate Ways is the more important chapter of 4. Just reiterate that again. Without Separate Ways, 4 is nearly irrelevant to me.
I would agree. As you said, I just wonder what Mikami's involvement, whether that analogy that you put forward was an accurate portrayal. Because on the face of it sounds like it is. And had it not been for Separate Ways, which kind of all it really did, I think, from my opinion, it is kind of restore that Enigma mystery that was created by Resident Evil 2.
Yeah.
Because, as I said, the GameCube version she's just after all this time, she was just someone working for the big bad in RE1. That makes it a slightly small world. And then Separate Ways kind of said, well, actually, she's double-crossing Wesker, who himself has kind of betrayed the company that they've both been working for. But they've both betrayed him, and he's betrayed her, or blah, blah, blah. And there's far more to it.
The disappointing thing with sort of post-Separate Ways is she disappears storyline-wise for 6 years, and then has the most pointless appearance in Damnation.
That's such a shame. I think Damnation was a huge missed opportunity.
Because, again, they use her in the marketing really well. Because I think they used the line of dialogue. I'm a member of the BSAA in the trailer. So of course, the fan base goes crazy because it looks like she's playing, she's using a persona and she's managing to mislead everybody. And her appearance in the film it's just so underwhelming. She does nothing. And then obviously the hook at the end, which is still open. I think that was a plot. I think it was always intended to be Simmons, the figure at the end.
But it can't be, could it?
I don't think it can now.
Because they weren't in communication at that point. She had already.
Then you can't believe they allowed an error like that to occur.
I don't know. Someone was doing Mahara Desire at that point as well. So.
Is that finished yet?
I don't know.
Madam President, your visitor has arrived.
Show her in. Welcome to Eastern Slav, my dear. I am President Svetlana Belakova. Gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to our guest. This young lady is a special investigator for the United Nations Bioterrorism Security Alliance.
Good day, Madam President. Gentlemen, I have been sent here by the BSAA. My name is Ada Wong.
So yes, that brings us nicely to 2011. I suppose with Resident Evil Damnation and the incident in the Eastern Slav Republic. And yes, we've kind of touched upon the Derek Simmons involvement, or the lack of, because I think if you actually look at the image at the end, it clearly is supposed to be Simmons. It looks like his model.
It says in the limited edition art book that only came out in Japan that it's an important figure from Resident Evil 6.
Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. So,
but in story terms, it clearly can't. Not unless you think the Ada in Damnation is Carla Radebe.
I was about to say, yeah. I suppose that's the only other way. Well, that would explain the kind of non-interaction between her and Leon.
Is that a thing? Is that a theory?
No, I don't know. We just made that up.
Oh, fucking hell.
It's the only way that the Simmons thing at the end could work, though.
Yeah.
And it's a shame, really, because Damnation had so much going for it.
But like you say, it sort of suffers from the same problems with the main Resident Evil 4 campaign, in that Ada's just there in the background to get a sample, and that's it. Whereas, like you said before, Separate Ways fixed that aspect, but there's no such thing for Damnation. What we really need is like a definitive Ada's report that covers her entire dealings throughout the entire series. That would be awesome.
And again, that's what we thought 6 was going to be, with her own campaign.
Which, goes back to my point. It is because of the financial hit that I think Capcom got with RE6, at least commercially with the reviews. Are they going to even bother?
Because I think because there's always, for years now, there's been talk of a reboot and things like that. Yeah. And I will say, if nothing else, with like Revelations 2, the remake of 2, 0, and remake remaster, I think they are invested in maintaining the timeline as it is. I don't think we're going to get a reboot anytime soon, and that is a good thing. Revelations 2 did some good in healing the sort of goodwill. Still not perfect. There's still a long way to go. But if they're going to play the Ada card again, then it has to be sort of for resolution now. Because 6 was one game too far, just playing her to be the mystery again. I mean, with all the Carla stuff, it could have led to some really interesting material as she questions who she is with the doppelganger running around and everything. And she just doesn't. She just behaves exactly as she has done. She just deals with it and moves on. And we as an audience and as a fan base are just left completely empty. I think so many of us came out of 6. We went into 6 thinking, we're going to get so many answers about Ada as a character. The whole game seems built around her. And by the end of it, we still know nothing about her at all. We don't know anything. The whole game of 6 is just a colossal waste of time.
It should have been the RE5 for Wesker. I mean, by the time RE6 comes along, we've got we've known she's worked with Wesker before. We know she's betrayed him. There's also the organisation, whoever they are. And then we also know that she has worked with Ricardo Irving from RE5, passing on Spencer's location onto Wesker, so she's still got some communication with him. And it was all kind of building up. We had exactly in the same way of Wesker, we have these little tidbits here and there, such as Damnation as well, all building up to something. And, you can mimic it to Wesker. You had him in Code Veronica, a bit of the Umbrella Chronicles, mentions in RE2 from Wesker's report. And it's all little things that all build up to a satisfying conclusion as to what he wanted with it. And as you said, RE6 just didn't bother to do all that with Ada Wong. And it was ultimately a bit pointless in establishing exactly what she is after, because it ended in exactly the same way RE4 ended with Ada. She goes out, she's done her job, and then she contacts her employer and says, I'm coming back. And you go, great. Who? Not going to tell you.
But the worrying thing is, and I think we've mentioned this already tonight, I don't think Capcom know the answer to that question, no, Nick?
No.
And that's the worrying thing. If you knew that they had a little Bible or a reference book that's passed on between each writer with all the rules, and there was an entire section dedicated to Ada where it listed this is who she works for this year, then that would be really cool. And I just don't think they have that. I think they literally...
Well, they've got the archives.
But even the archives is vague with regards to the organisations and stuff. I mean, it names them, it mentions the organisation, but does anyone really know what that is, beyond it
To-
just being a name.
If I remember correctly, in one of the pre-release versions of Resident Evil 4, according to Kawamura, I believe his interpretation of it was a Chinese criminal agency. It was not further elaborated on.
Okay.
And I'm assuming that's where she got all her training and that from.
And again, a huge missed opportunity by the fact that Ada was in her not home country, but a country of origin in RE6, and yet that's not referenced or mentioned or, elaborated upon at all.
All it needs is someone with the balls to say, right, let's evaluate this character and let's do this with it, because it's a parallel of what happened to Wesker, really, because when they brought Wesker back, I think they just did it for shock value to begin with.
Yeah.
And then they sort of thought, well, hang on, where we're going with it. Every game he turned up in or he mentioned, he was like, oh yeah, he was just in the background, or he'd get his virus at the end and escape.
Yep.
And then you could see it got to the point where Capcom said, right, we need to end this, so let's kill him, or whatever.
We need the guy from 5.
Yeah, and I think the time is, like Sean said, time has come for the same to be done with Ada.
I just don't think it will.
That's my biggest fear. I think they'll either chicken out and kill her off, and we'll never know, or they'll have to do some sort of Sergei Vladimir-like additions to the canon, shall we say, where, I don't know, they'll probably make up some bollocks like she's the daughter of a disgraced former founder of Umbrella that we've never heard of, and, her entire crusade has been to get justice for her father, some bollocks like that. They'll make something up like that.
Yes, and it'll be completely nonsensical when viewed
Yeah.
within her interactions in RE2, for example.
Yeah.
Oh, I hope not. I mean, it wouldn't have even been the end of the world, if she was setting up Neo Umbrella. At least there would have been, method in her approach to the games.
Just take Carla Adame out of Resident Evil 6 and just have Ada as, like you say, the person that founded Neo Umbrella. I just think that would have been so much more interesting.
It'd been a bit simplistic, I think, for Ada, but it would have worked.
As long as she had a proper motivation for doing it.
Yes.
And obviously it would have made that scene between Leon and Chris much more effective.
Exactly. But they couldn't, they didn't have the story capabilities of being able to have Chris and Leon at loggerheads over a genuine person. They had to go, oh, we were mistaken all the time, which is a severe cop-out.
Enjoy the show.
Yes, it was quite revealing.
How do you mean?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it you on this tape, Ada? You're the one behind Neo Umbrella.
I
don't know what you're talking about. Simmons would never be foolish enough to show his cards. He and his family want one thing:
to stabilize and sustain the system they've created.
But you want to destroy it. And the world will blame you.
Okay, does anyone want to actually discuss Ada's campaign at all? I'm going to be brutally honest. I haven't finished it. I got so bored of Resident Evil 6. And I think where was I? I was just in the Chinese bit at the beginning, and I think the chainsaw, whatever it is, Huavo, and I thought, I can't really be bothered with this.
The thing is, it does. Ada's campaign does one of the really cool things I like games in Zero, and I've always got a soft spot for this kind of thing. 2 did it well, 4 did it well, and 6 did it well. I love seeing events from different perspectives, and I think 6. One of the things 6 does really, really well is how the campaigns integrate and cross over. And if you play them a certain way, you actually do get like the way the chainsaw, the one you've just talked about, Nick. The way he crosses over between like Ada's campaign and then Jake and Sherry's is kind of cool. And when you play it in a chronological way, like John and I have before, it actually all does cross over and work really well. And so from that point of view, I do kind of like it, but it doesn't add anything to the game at all. And the Carla boss fight is just silly. Just really, really silly.
I don't even know what it's about.
She just becomes a huge blob monster that takes over the boat. And it is kind of icky, and it's one of the only real sort of horror moments in the game. But it just leads to a ridiculous boss fight where she's basically just a face that you have to shoot through and then shoot a nitrogen canister and it just kills her and she just dies. And that's it. End of Carla. It's all a bit anticlimactic. There's no...
She's C-Virus as well.
Yeah,
she just basically becomes a boss fight, whereas what the game would have done if it was a bit braver is actually have a dialogue interaction between those two. But they just spend the entire chapter of Carla just shouting at her while she is assuming blobby faces on the side of walls, and it just doesn't do anything with it.
The problem with Ada's whole campaign was that the ultimate reveal of Carla being a doppelganger was nullified by the leak 10 months before the game came out, or whatever it was. So you don't get any answers as you're playing all the way through it. You just get one cutscene at the end where she's like, "Oh, Carla, you poor bitch." That's it.
Oh dear. I do need to go back and finish it off. I do think the Mazda MX-5 scene killed me, though. I just got, no, this is not Resident Evil. Oh dear. We've touched on her ultimate motivations, I suppose. Does anyone have any other insight into where we think, even if it never happens, can we even speculate as to what she's trying to do?
I think they could just take the easy route and just have her as literally just being a mercenary who just works for the highest bidder. Job done.
Yeah.
She doesn't come across as a kind of bounty hunter, though, does she?
No.
She's clearly got... I mean, you can see that in RE4. You know, when she sends Wesker another present and he sends it to the other company, she's not doing it just for the lulz. She seems to have a definitive motivation as to why she's doing it.
It's going to need some of the best writing to get around this.
But that's the problem. You know, one of the criticisms, I suppose, of Revelations 2 was that it did feel a bit forced at times. I think with a lot of things, and Alex Wesker wasn't as great as perhaps she should have been, and it was felt it was done there just to kind of please the fans. And I think when you're dealing with a big franchise, that should, in many ways, should always be secondary. Doing a film, the number one thing should always be the story. And I think with games now, it is all about the story. Then everything flows from that. I think that's been Capcom's biggest problem. They haven't been able to come up with a constructive storyline, and they've just kind of gone, well, the fans like this, the fans like that. Let's look at Cap community web forums. What do they want? They want that. Okay, we'll chuck that in. And I think it's all been very piecemeal, as opposed to a cohesive, structured plan as to where they want to take the story, especially with Ada.
I think she's strong enough to star in her own game, though. If we're going to get a game that explains her from top to bottom, then I think she should be the main playable character.
I think that's the only way you can pull it off. As I said, you need a big game for her. But yeah, I didn't think of that, actually. Yeah.
I've said it before, if they're going to carry the series on into a next generation with new characters, or the likes of Jake and Sherry, then I think Ada would be the logical bridge. You know, the passing of the torch, so to speak, from the old generation to the new. I think once Ada's story is concluded, I think a majority of the old fans, shall we say, who've been since the beginning, the Ada plotline is really the only thing we have left. Yeah. And once that's answered, I mean, I personally, I'd probably still follow the series, but I wouldn't have as invested an interest in it as what I have done. Because for me, all the storylines that I was interested in are concluded.
They could almost have, like, I like Sherry, I like Jake, I actually thought he was quite a cool character in the end. But I've always said a kind of reboot, a soft reboot, having Resident Evil 7. Don't even call it Resident Evil 7, call it Resident Evil. You know, just go back to the basics, but have it as a storyline like 30 years later or something like that, or 20 years later. There's been no biohazard incidents, and you could kind of have Ada Wong as this old recluse who's built up a legacy of knowledge about BOWs, and, you know, it could almost follow the kind of Luke Skywalker role that we're presumably going to see in episode 7, as that, as you said, that carrying the torch of the people who, of the original kind of game / trilogy, moving on to the new trilogy, you know, from Resident Evil 7 onwards. That could be a logical conclusion, whilst keeping the existing fans happy. Hey, Ada Wong's there. Her story's concluded. Oh, well, we've still got a Birkin and we've still got a Wesker.
No, I would, given what they did with the character, I would be more than happy if, like, someone like Sherry became the face of the series.
Yeah.
Moving forward. I just think, you know, she's really cool, and I didn't think they would pull that off with her, but I was amazed how endeared I was to that character in 6. I genuinely think Sherry is one of the best things 6 has going for it.
And Jake wasn't horrendous either.
No, he wasn't, to be fair.
He wasn't.
And you kind of got from that sort of post-credits ending where he goes out to fight the bioweapons in the street, that is kind of a torch passing with Chris going to him.
Yeah.
I mean, the same way that Piers should have really been like the new BSAA character, because all of the last chapter that of Chris does in 6 is talk about how he's going to pass the torch on to Piers.
Yeah.
And they should have just fucking let him do it. They should have just had Chris either die heroically or bow out from the series in retirement and go and live a happy life with Jill, and let Piers, Sherry and Jake carry on the fight from now on.
And it just makes the end of Revelations 2 even more pissing off.
Yeah.
With Claire, tell Pierce to look after whatever. It's like, oh.
You would have had, though, you would have had Pierce, Sherry, Jake, and Moira replacing Chris, Jill, Claire, and Leon.
See, that's quite cool.
Because all of them are good characters.
They are.
And that is the one thing I've got to say, this fucking series, the characters are phenomenal. You know, even when you think, even like a game comes along, and I remember we all, come on, let's be honest, we all wrote Moira off from those trailers. And she turned out to be a cracking character in the end. They did a really good job with her.
Yeah, those 4 characters have all appeared in, one game each. And yet, in all those games, they've been suitably fleshed out to such an extent that we all want them back. That's quite an achievement. Because if they suddenly said Resident Evil 7 starring Leon, I'd be like, oh.
You would be. You would. Actually.
Because, I mean, what the hell's... I mean, Leon he's so bloody cardboard cut out of, insert generic action
hero. The great thing we've said about all those characters as well is kind of like the generation of characters that came before them. They all work in different departments. So that gives them an interesting dynamic to play with. So you've got Piers on the BSAA side, Sherry on the DSO side, you've got the TerraSave representative in Moira, and Jake's sort of loose cannon.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of dynamic that a good writer could play with there. I'm not always a fan of, when a film comes back 30 years later and it's the son of one of the characters from the original trilogy or whatever. But Resident Evil, I feel, has done this quite naturally.
Because it has. Yeah.
It makes a bit of sense.
Yeah. And of course, with a writer, you don't always have to include those 4. I mean, they can always insert another character in, and a new character. And they've always done this throughout the series with either Sheva or Billy or, or whoever, Krauser, even to an extent. And you could have a lot of dynamics.
The only time they've really fucked that up is with Jake. Who's the shoehorned in Wesker's son.
Yeah.
But there's a good writer out there who'll retcon that cleverly into it being Alex's son.
Yeah. Before we end, is there any other points people want to raise about Ada Wong?
Just don't fuck it up, Capcom. You've come so far.
Don't forget about it. Don't leave her out the next 4 games.
Okay. That then finishes our discussion on Ada Wong. So we'll now move on to this podcast edition of Neptune's Biohazard Quiz.
New format. New questions. And new challenges. Each broadcast, a new quiz to test the resolve. Welcome to Neptune's Biohazard Quiz!
Welcome to this edition of the quiz. Only 3 participants this week, so a good chance for everyone to gain some points. Now, I can't remember. No, I came up with these questions. I'm trying to think. Someone sends in me questions occasionally, which is always nice. And I think I came up with these. Or did Vito? Vito sent me some.
No,
Vito sent me some questions.
These are going to be easy then.
He did. I'm sure I had some Ada Wong questions, so I was going to use.
What is the serial number written on the side of Carlos's assault rifle seen in a split-second shot in Umbrella Chronicles?
Right, so as usual, chaps, we have 5 questions, and 3 of them are on Ada Wong, 2 of them are not. The 3 from Ada Wong comes from our regular contributor, Vito. So thank you, Vito. Not too difficult. I think you might be able to do all right with them. So if everyone wants to clear their desktops, you can open up Notepad. Let's go with question number 1. Who established the BSAA?
Do you want names?
No, organisation.
Oh, right, thank you.
I think fairly gettable. Question number 2 moves on from that question. In what year were the BSAA established?
Oh, there's going to be controversy with this one.
I think, if memory serves, this has been a question before. But if you go back through the podcast, that'll be one, and it did cause a headache last time.
Oh, did it? I
think so, yeah.
Have we got to the point where we're repeating questions? Okay, so question number 3 is the first from Vito. What was the name of Ada Wong's motion capture actress from Resident Evil 6?
Fucking hell.
I think that's a good amount of knowledge. And question number 4. Can you name 3 chapters from Separate Ways?
Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3.
I think they've all got names, Bats.
Oh, balls. Have they?
Apparently so. This is information from Vito. I
think they do.
I do not question the knowledge of Vito.
Is there a point for each, or do we have to just get all 3?
3.
Shit.
But if you get 2 right, then you get 3 right. Okay, I'll leave you some time to think about that. And finally, question number 5. What was the firepower of Ada's shotgun in Separate Ways?
Oh dear.
This is nails.
Some legendary Vito questions there. Join us after this and we'll see how everyone's done.
It wasn't easy, but I'd say the mission was a success. Getting my hands on the sample was my initial objective, after all. But I've sent Wesker a different present, just as the organization ordered. Pretending to work with him was entertaining. Albert Wesker. I wonder where he's headed next. Something tells me this whole affair has just been a taste of what he's got in store. To him, Umbrella represented power. He used it to hide behind while he made plans of his own. And now the Umbrella's been folded. With the sanctuary of their old Umbrella ruined, those in power struggle to erect a new one. They are aware of their own crookedness and deceit as they engage in their personal war of light and darkness. That's why Wesker will stop at nothing in opening his new Umbrella. The giant pharmaceutical corporation S maintains medical and drug facilities the world over. We know for certain that Wesker has been in contact with them following Umbrella's demise. There's no doubt we'll next hear from him there. The organization must remain vigilant. But Wesker's not stupid. He knows exactly what the organization is thinking. He and I still have time to continue our little game of cat and mouse before the next move is played. This mission may be over, but the battle is just beginning.
So, welcome back to Neptune's Biohazard Quiz. We'll run through the answers now. I'm hoping people should get 2. So, who established the BSAA? Batman, who did you put?
The Global Pharmaceutical Consortium.
Okay, Stars Torrent?
See, I wrote the individual original 11.
Oh,
I'm guessing
right.
It's from a more organisational point of view, yeah, so I accept I got that one wrong.
Mr. Spencer?
I put Global Pharmaceutical Consortium.
Yes, I'll accept that. I think the correct Japanese translation, at least according to Project Umbrella, is the Federation of Pharmaceutical Companies, but I will accept the English translation. So points there to Batman and Mr. Spencer. Question number 2 was what year were they established? Stars Tyrant?
2004.
2004. Mr. Spencer?
2002.
Batman?
2004.
2004 is correct. A point for Batman and Stars Tyrant.
The only reason I remember is because Umbrella's End is 2003 and Chris and Jill are part of the anti-Umbrella organisation. It's not been named yet.
Yes.
Well, it's not turned out as controversial as I thought. The BSAA file in Resident Evil 5 implies they were founded in 2003. But on all the Japanese websites, it does say 2004. So.
Okay. Question number 3, which of course is the first one from Vito. What was the name of Ada Wong's motion capture actress in Resident Evil 6? Mr. Spencer, did you know the answer to this one?
No.
No. Okay. Batman?
No.
Stars Tyrant?
All I did was put a voice actor down, thinking she might have done both, and it was Courtney Taylor.
Incorrect. It's Michelle Lee.
Right.
Good guess though. Very good, very good. Because sometimes they do both, don't they? So
yeah.
There we go. So no points there. Question number 4. Name 3 chapters from Separate Ways. Batman, you can have a stab first.
See, I don't believe they have chapter names, do they?
They do, yeah. I can't remember any of them.
Is it not just directives like ring the church bell?
No, I think the report files have names. Hang on, let me have a... Because I don't have an answer, so I'm going to look up now. Or you can tell us, Nick, because I don't have an answer.
Batman, I would suggest you carry on down those lines for that. That's the right answer, the first one.
Ring the church bell. Stop Leon's assassination.
Oh.
And meet Lewis or something, I don't know.
Mr. Spencer, what did you put?
Didn't have anything.
Didn't know. And Stars Torrent?
No, I didn't know. Although I thought the reports did have names, but I guess they didn't.
I'm going to give a point for Batman there. No, I'll give him half. I can't be bothered. Nothing. Right, chapter 1. Wait just wait. Chapter 1 was Ring the Church Bell. Chapter 2, Rescue Lewis Sarah.
I said ring the church bell.
Yeah, but you only got 1.
Oh.
We got 2. Chapter 3 was Retrieve the Sample. Chapter 4, Stop Leon's Assassination. And Chapter 5, Obtain the Sample. There you go. So I suppose you got 2. I suppose I'm being a bit harsh. No, Batman, you should get a point because you got 2 there. You got 2 out of 3. 2 out of 3, so very good. And finally, question 5, what was the firepower of Ada's shotgun in Separate Ways? We're looking for a number here. Mr. Spencer?
7.0.
Batman?
5.0.
Stars Torrent?
6.0.
Point for Batman, of course.
Oh. Was it? Oh, sorry, that was a total guess.
5.0, so well done. So let's have
yeah, fucking hell.
Even his guesses are right. God damn it. So look at the final scores. Batman, you win with 4 stars, and Mr. Spencer tied with just a single point this week. So thank you all very much for playing. Join us again for the next podcast where we'll have some more questions. So, folks, that wraps up our Project Umbrella podcast special, if you like, on Ada Wong. An insightful look. Next podcast, we are going to be dissecting the very exciting news that Resident Evil 2 is getting a remake, apparently down to fan pressure, as the viral marketing would like us to believe. So we're going to be discussing that. We will probably also be having a sub-discussion on the recently announced Resident Evil 0 remake, as well as probably just a quick discussion on the Origins collection that's being bundled out as well. There's lots of news to get through, and apologies for the delay in this one. This podcast has been recorded over 2 sessions, and so there will be a disclaimer. There will be a disclaimer saying that we're a bit out of date with the news at the beginning of the podcast. But never mind, it will be rectified. We will be back. We will be discussing the key issues in the world of Biohazard and what we think of them. Should be fun, folks. Should be fun. I will say, therefore, thank you very much for listening on this Ada Wong special. It's goodbye from me, Neptune.
It's goodbye from me, Batman.
Goodbye from me, Star.
That's goodbye from me, Mr. Spence.
I'm Leon, and you are?
Ada Wong.
What was that? She was about to kill you. But you better start working with me here. Never make it out of this alive. Please, Ada. I need your help.
You're right.
Be careful, especially with that woman.
What woman?
Ada. She's a special agent sent here to retrieve the G sample. She was approaching the researchers and obtaining information about Umbrella. She'll do whatever it takes to accomplish her purpose. She's highly dangerous.
Ada isn't. No.
I'm leaving Leon around.
Leon. Maybe you forgot, Wesker. I don't always play by your rules. We have to get that parasite out of your body.
But before that, I gotta say that.
Leon, now! Move!
You okay?
I've been better. Use this! Sorry, Leon. Hand it over.
You do what I says.
I'll take good care of it. Here, catch. Better get a move on. See you around.
Very cute. She's like a part of me I can't let go. Let's leave it at that. What the hell is all this?
Find anything interesting?
I reported her 6 months ago. Why are you here?
Tracking the man behind all this.
Tomorrow the U.S. will suffer a violent turn at the hands of Neo Umbrella's very own Ada Wong.
She's working for New Umbrella. You know what that means? Yeah. I do.
Need a ride, handsome?